Hello and welcome to this very special post-USA election edition of the Cosmic Buzz. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer.
And I'm Alison Chester-Lambert.
And our topic today is why Trump, the spiritual answer. Alison, back in March you privately confided in me that you'd been looking at the astrology of the election and had seen that Donald Trump would win. Given his shocking behaviour and comments, I frankly had a hard time believing that. And so did many thousands of your followers when you went public with that prediction in August. But despite receiving a lot of flack on Facebook, you stuck to your guns. And now here we are with the evidence. And millions of people around the world are asking, why Trump? Before we look at astrology's answer to that question, I want to make it quite clear to our audience that neither you nor I have any interest in taking sides or arguing for or against either presidential nominee. We are simply discussing what astrology can show us about the bigger picture here to help us understand the extraordinarily contentious nature of this situation that America has experienced for the last 2 years, as well as what we might expect moving forward. So what does astrology reveal about the spiritual context of this bitterly acrimonious presidential election? Why has it been so contentious? And why is the dissension and conflict still going on?
Well, right, and it is still going on as well. It's been quite frightening what's going on, actually. I think to start with, what we need to understand is why we should use astrology to look at this, because any of us examining this at the moment are walking on very tender eggshells. There's a lot of hurt people out there. And I was actually commenting on Facebook, actually, and I think, if I remember rightly, what I was saying was that astrology enables us to look deeper under the surface and to recognize the structures and threads, so we get a more reliable framework for analysis that isn't coloured by our own personal beliefs. This is what we're both striving to do. Let's not look at our own personal beliefs. Let's just dig down and see and ask, what is the cosmos wanting here? What does the cosmos intend us to experience, and how can we learn and grow to our benefit? And I think that's the important thing. Astrology is going to be open to interpretation, but hopefully if I stick to the keywords, then the listeners can apply their own interpretation, and that might help them then understand things. Because when people are hurting this badly, and they are hurting, understanding is what they want, and I think that's what we can offer here. So
I think we need to offer understanding, Alison, because as you said, people are hurt, and I think the only way that people can find some road through this is to get a different perspective on it.
Yeah. So I need to just say a little bit of astrology jargon, but then I'll decode it so people can understand it. You don't have to be an astrologer to listen to this. So what we're looking at in astrology is something called the Neptune-Saturn square. And this has been in place for about 18 months. And if I was just to put that into 2 words, what does the Neptune-Saturn square epitomize? What is it in the collective? I would call it the cultural malaise. Now, this cultural malaise can be applied to any topic, really. So in the USA, over the last 18 months, we've seen the rise of certain things that have caused consternation and concern. So in the USA, we've got the Black Lives Matter movement. We've had the presidential candidate issues. And more recently, we've had the Native American Indian stand against the Dakota pipeline. Over in the UK and Europe, we've had the Brexit issues about the UK leaving Europe. And so we have to ask, what is it about in general? Where are we going, and what do we want to achieve? What does this cultural malaise, and also a collision of ideologies, it's also a collision of ideologies, what is it ultimately wanting to achieve? And I think the answer to that is a new social consciousness. And that's a heck of a big thing, and it's quite an invisible thing to reach for, and there's a lot of sensitivities in there, because what we're looking at by achieving a new social consciousness is we're looking for people's hidden prejudices and their ethical stances to come up to the surface, to be examined. Because it's all about forming a new social consciousness, there is a purpose to that, but we need to bring up all the stuff that is there already in an effort to examine it. So ethics and beliefs and morals and principles are all going to be colliding and coming up, and we've all got individual ones. So, and then the resulting cultural malaise really, it raises a free-floating anxiety, which becomes almost like a paranoia at times, and I think we're actually kind of reaching paranoid proportions at the moment. Or it can be just a general depression at other times. If I'm just going to go back to something. The last time we had this Neptune-Saturn square in the sky, in its particular zodiac sign, the one it's in now, we had the Salem witch trials, and I cannot get that out of my head. I keep going back to it because there is almost a witch trial going on at the moment by various supporters of various factions, and it feels very much like that. So we have to ask ourselves, what is our part in this? And what are our ethics, beliefs, morals and principles? Now, pretty much we'll know what they are at the moment because they are being tested. They're being tested and they're being stretched, and so we're being asked to find what our beliefs and morals are. And now we can be looking for our personal beliefs and morals and ethics, but we're also part of the collective. So we might be part of a collective search for beliefs, morals, ideologies, principles. And it seems America in particular is struggling with this right now, but the UK and Europe were going through that in the summer when they were looking at the issues around being part of Europe. So the type of behaviour we've got coming out at the moment, and I think you've seen this yourself, Sandie, you just have to look at Facebook. There's so much judgmentalism. Hypocritical behaviour is being paraded in front of us on our news and by the people in our news items. Duplicitous statements are coming out. There is evidence of righteousness. We can see hubris, haughtiness, insincerity, sarcasm. I mean, have you seen all this stuff?
Well, it's like, the deepest, darkest underbelly of humanity is being exposed right now. I am watching so many people have meltdowns, people going into anger that have never really expressed a great deal of anger before over all kinds of things. It's as if people feel personally, deeply personally attacked, and they are going on the defensive.
Yes, because it's reaching into invisible values that we can't quantify any other way. When it comes to our principles, we can't add it up and point to it on a bank statement. We can't point to our plot of land or our house. These are our visible things, and we can say for certain, I've got this, I've got that. But when it comes to principles, they're so amorphous, they're so nebulous. We have to explain ourselves, but also find what it is that we want to be principled about. But because they're invisible processes and invisible values, we're having to explain or collide against other people on something that we can't really quantify. So everybody's coming out with vague statements to support the fact that they're supporting something. So they'll say, well, he said this or she said that. And then did they really say it, or did somebody just make it up and put it onto we're all kind of on very kind of like soft ground here, all coming out with statements that... And I think this free-floating anxiety around this has been within easy reach all year, so it's been bubbling up all year. And this actually, the free-floating anxiety is entirely down to the close proximity of the spiritual realms, actually, because the planet Neptune is a spiritual planet with a heavy water element, and it's coming in very close. But I'll talk about that later, because otherwise we'll get bogged down with that. So just to continue talking about the effect of this Neptune-Saturn square. So the action it has is one of exposing and clarifying and blaming. And so it will expose that which should have been rectified long before. Now we've got another planet coming in here and doubling this up, one of the new dwarf planets called Eris. Eris is in another astrological formation with another dwarf planet called Haumea, and then a planet that we already know a lot about, Uranus. And we're getting some spillover from that. And what that is saying is that anything that should have been rectified years ago will be brought up for rectification now, but also it come out with extreme anger. And I think this is why we're getting this huge amount of anger as Eris gets involved. So things that needed to be clarified, which were murky and difficult to make out previously, they're coming up. But we're also getting into blaming and scapegoating as a result. But let's just hope good can come out of this. So in the meantime, just to kind of wrap this up, we've got ethics, morals, principles and beliefs which are being scrutinized so that we can refresh and discover our invisible values, and then we can ask which of our values are most important. We don't know that until it's tested, and we're in this testing time. We don't know about the dark until we switch out the light. So that's kind of where we're at briefly. But the other thing, the reason that the USA is hurting in particular, I think, at the moment is because the USA's birth chart, yes, the USA has a horoscope based on the 4th of July, 1776. The charter or the independence document was written there in Philadelphia, and so that is a birth chart for the USA. Well, that is right under this Neptune-Saturn square. And so the transits are bearing down on that birth chart and indicating a whole pile of grief in the USA. So and I guess what we can take from that is nothing could have changed this malaise. Because that birth chart is going to react to the transit of Neptune and Saturn now, that was always going to happen, always. This terrible malaise was always going to happen. This deep division was always going to happen. Trump or no Trump, it was going to happen. So if it had gone the other way, it would have been just as bad, I think.
So, okay, if it was always going to happen, Trump or no Trump, that begs the question, why him?
Well, one of the things that we can say about Trump is he is so contentious. And so if the cosmos is looking to bring up issues where ethics, morals, principles, beliefs are being highlighted, then my goodness, we've got a good vehicle here. So the cosmos is taking us out on a limb with the extreme of Trump so that we can wake up and get involved. One thing you can say about Trump is that he has had the ability to wake us up, and we have all got involved. Now that can be said of Clinton as well as Trump, actually. And the deep division between the two, which is so clear, I mean, in terms of just gender and their past and background and everything, the division has been so clear. It has been a huge vehicle for waking up and getting involved. I mean, if we're going to be honest, if we were looking at Obama being re-elected for another 4 years, everybody would just have stayed asleep. So I think...
I was going to say, okay, so what about if it had gone the other way? Hillary, would we have stayed asleep? I mean, she's polarised a lot of people too.
Yes, that's true, but I think what the presence of Trump has done was, whether or not he won, he has woken people up. I think this whole last year has been about how the press and everybody have had headlines that were very principled. We've had things said that were highly contentious, and so there has been a huge activation, and it's the water, if you like, on top of the gas stove has had the gas under it, heating it, and it's come to boiling point, but it's been getting hotter and hotter all year. And I think Trump's presence in this whole thing has brought this to life, because he is the huge figure he is. And actually she's a huge figure too, so I think that... But why Trump winning? I couldn't say why he had to win over her, except that I can add in another astrological thing here now, and that is we've also had the Uranus-Pluto square in action, and that's been since 2008, and that has required change. Now, if we add this factor in and we look at Brexit, the UK, fundamentally, the people on the ground wanted change. And so that's what we went for. We knew what we were voting for. We wanted change. And I think that added Uranus-Pluto thing has said change. Now, if Hillary had got it, you would have pretty much had the same kind of stuff. I mean, I know there's differences, but you would have had the same kind of stuff, because the House would have been Republican and she's Democrat, so you would that same sticking sort of thing. You know, you can't get things through the House. I hope I've said that the right way around. That just shows you how much I don't know about this. But you're not going to get that now, because you've got a Republican with a Republican House, Republican Senate, etc. And so therefore you've got change like it has never been before. When Obama was re-elected, you still got that sticking stuff. You haven't now. There is the opportunity for real change because Trump can pretty much, assuming his party backs him, get things through. So actually real change can happen. And so therefore I think that's why we're looking at something as big as this, because it's all come together like a perfect storm in astrology.
You know, when you first told me this, I didn't like what I was hearing. I only looked at, one view of it, and over the months in between, I thought about it, and I thought, well, if you're going to have change, you've got to destroy what is the status quo. You've really got to throw a Molotov cocktail into that, and he's a Molotov cocktail, okay. I mean, he just opens his mouth and it all comes out without any breaks, any filters. And contentious is, I think, a very mild word to add to this man. But then you said to me, when I said, no, please don't say that, you said to me, but he's going to change. Watch him change from the day he gets it. How do you know this? How do you know he's going to change?
There's a couple of things there I could say. I actually knew he was going to win last March, and I told a couple of people, Americans who actually are on my email subscription list, because I have had people buy into an email subscription list with me, and I actually told one lady last March, and she went, don't say a word to anybody. Don't let this get out. You'll lose your whole audience. Please don't tell anybody about this. And so I had to, and I respected her judgment, and so I then had to keep quiet. I sent it out to my email subscribers. They got it, but they all got the instruction, keep this quiet, don't say a word to anybody. I mean, that's how contentious it was. But so that it was always a bit difficult because I wanted to say it so much sooner, but it was like walking on eggshells. And I'm just laughing about what you just said about Trump, about he opens his mouth. I say he opens his mouth to change feet. I think that's what you just said. He has a sun in Gemini. Now, I know you've got a sun in Gemini, and I've got a sun in Gemini. So, and Gemini can be like a meatball with arms. It can just kind of like say stuff and it doesn't really connect. But he was born on a full moon. So he's got his full moon, his moon is in Sagittarius, and it is almost exactly opposite his sun in Gemini, and the whole thing's square Neptune. So honestly, with this, you can get someone who really just opens his mouth to change feet. It's just anything can come out, and I think we could actually kind of give that, it's some kind of condition that we could give a label to. But the other thing about his chart, he's got a Venus-Saturn conjunction, and then I think he's got something else conjunct Chiron. I'm just reaching for his chart here. Yeah, his Jupiter's conjunct Chiron. Now, what that would say, classic astrology says that he has low self-esteem. So, seriously, I'm going to say I think he was born with low self-esteem. But
do you know what a psychologist would say? That his behaviour, his self-aggrandizing, absolutely, that all spells low self-esteem.
It's a cover-up. I mean, this is the assessment I would make with psychological astrology. I would say it's a cover-up. I mean, he just felt, I think when he was born in his early childhood, he felt overwhelmed by his environment. And his main caregivers didn't give him the kind of admiration that he wanted because they were sort of too busy giving it to themselves. And so he never got the boost he needed. I think he's carried around low self-esteem and hidden it with all of this behavior. He has for those who don't know his chart, he has an ascendant in Leo. And so, we should be talking about a man who has great confidence. But the zodiac sign of Leo actually has a great deal of pain around being noticed, as I've noticed. And I always refer to people with a lot of Leos being loved in one colour but needing another colour and therefore not really getting the confidence that they need from birth. Anyway, but another thing, just before I talk about why I think he'll change now, his birth chart is deeply connected to the USA birth chart. There are so many connections. I mean, I ran it off earlier, and he's just got a ton of stuff connecting to the American chart, not least his Chiron at 14 and the USA's chart, their Saturn at 14. There's a whole pile of stuff. If people want to email it me, I'll send it to them. But I think this guy understands America. Whatever we think of him, his chart says he understands America. Now, I've only done his chart because he is now president-elect, and I'm looking forward. I'm not looking back to Hillary's because there's no point in looking in the past. We look forward. And so when I say that Trump will change, I'm saying this hopefully to comfort those who are in such distress about the result. And I think one of the things that I can offer them as an English person who had to go through the Leave and Remain referendum that we had in the summer, and when we were deeply divided as a nation, what we had to do from the next day was say, okay, it's over, we're moving forward. And so even our politicians who voted to leave and then they were stuck with Remain said, look, okay, we're all leavers now. So in that case, I've done his chart to help people with the fact you have a president-elect, and this is who he is.
Let me ask you a question. Let me
Sure.
ask you this. Looking at his chart, what you said about, his lack of confidence, what would you say he is feeling right now?
Oh, frightened to death. I mean, when you look at this stuff, you think, oh, really? And it was funny because during his acceptance speech, his family looked quite frightened to death. I mean, his wife looked like she was quite wooden. What the hell is happening to us here? I mean, this is what I saw. It may not be what other people
Be careful
saw.
what you wish for syndrome.
But I'll just give you the jargon in astrology. So his progressed sun moved into Virgo this week, and also his progressed moon in Cancer is over his natal Saturn. Now I'll just decode that for those that don't do astrology. This is a terrifying time. To have your progressed sun go from Leo, which is all kind of confidence and bumptious and outrageous statements and get me on a stage and look at me, to then suddenly, over the cliff, dump down into Virgo, suddenly you're terrified. Suddenly the biggest thing in your world is worry. Suddenly you're going to have all the worries of the world on your shoulders, and suddenly you change into someone who is diligent, hardworking, humble. Now, okay, this isn't going to happen overnight.
Humble. I must say that his, the first thing he said about asking for help and wanting, to make a partnership out of this was probably the first humble thing I've heard him say. Yeah, his acceptance speech. Yes, there was a bit, wasn't there, where he said, for those who've chosen not to support me in the past, I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together and unify our great country. Wow. That is such a Virgo statement. So, I'm, hopefully that, this is what happens. But that acceptance speech had all the hallmarks of Virgo. I will work hard to serve you, or, so many things there that I picked out, and I thought, he said, we'd take great care of these people, the urgent task of rebuilding, etc. No, there was a lot of Virgo in there, whatever you think about him. To study the Virgo the interesting thing is, as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, he can hide his tax returns. He can hide anything he wants to. He's got that power. But on the public stage, he can't hide anything. Right. So he's out there now, and people will be watching. Yeah. This is going to be fascinating to watch, really. Yeah. Let's see what happens. Big responsibility. We'll have to keep our eyes on this one. Yeah. But anyway, so he's worried and frightened, and there we go. So I don't know if that gives people out there any kind of comfort, but as an astrologer, in my opinion, that's what he's thinking right now. He's terrified. Okay. So the real question is, and the whole point about this special podcast of Cosmic Buzz is, what can we do to alleviate some of the bitterness, some of the fear, some of the anxiety and the hurt that everybody is feeling? I think the first thing is for people to understand this bigger context, the fact that the cosmos itself
is indicating that it needs to go through a process of examining ethics, morals, beliefs, and principles in an effort to find this new social consciousness. So we're in this washing machine. And so this is the bigger picture. Now, you've had a presidential race in the middle of it. This was just a vehicle. The two people concerned were just mouthpieces. They were vehicles again. What you had in front of you was this playing out. And so what you need to remember now is that you're a big player in this. I mean, they are bigger players, but you're part of it too. And so you need to engage with your own assessment of your own personal views, your own ethics, principles, morals, etc. You need to be thinking about yourself as part of the collective, because what we need all to, and I hope everybody that's listening to this already understands this, but because we are all ants in the anthill, every single one of us has a duty to connect to our own principles, ethics, morals, and examine them and think, where have we been duplicitous? Where have we been righteous? Where have we been judgmental? Where have we been hypocritical? Where have we been insincere? And should we be looking for our hidden prejudice, as our ethical stance says? If we hear outrageous statements that take our breath away, I think we need to think calmly and remember that we're all working this out for a bigger cause, that we're all helping to resolve the collective cultural malaise, that we're all contributing to the overall energy in our own way. One of the things that we do very well as humans, and we do this on behalf of the spiritual realms, is we take up the irreconcilable issues that nature can't resolve and we tussle with them to find the answers. And when we have our experience and we tussle and we fight and we cry and we grieve and we come to answers, we hand back that experience to the spiritual realms, to the other realms, to the other side, and the cosmos grows on our wisdom. It learns through us. Going through this, it learns, and it adds to the collective experience and raises the standard of the collective. And this is what we're doing at the moment. And so if you're hurting, I am sorry, and I deeply am, but you're part of a movement, and the work that you do in your pain, and pain and gain are proportional, the work that you do is adding to the cosmos, trying to work out a new way to be, a new social consciousness. And thank goodness that we're part of this and you're listening to this so that you can take the responsibility for that forward.
Some people might take issue with the suggestion that we are all just puppets on the end of the cosmic, strings. That's a hard thing for people to rationalise.
Yeah. So we can feel as if we have no power. We can feel like puppets. And I think there is a degree of that. In mythology, the ancient Zeus used to tremble at the sights of the three fates, the three goddesses that wove the thread of fate. But we do have influence because we are part of it. And so there is a dialogue, there is a two-way dialogue. We are feeding back as well as being fed by. And we increase our power and our ability to influence the future when we raise our spiritual awareness and take on issues like this, and instead of just hiding from them and being bitter and sitting on Facebook and lashing out at everybody, if we can raise the quality of our thinking, the quality of our response, if we can accept our responsibility and our spiritual responsibility in this, if we can accept that what's done is done, and now it's about repairing and looking for positive ways to reflect and positive ways to engage, then I think that what we're doing is we're increasing the strength and the power of us, ourselves, and our arguments and our engagement. And I think Cosmos loves that, and I think Cosmos responds to that and helps us get higher and higher and higher, or deeper and deeper and deeper into spiritual awareness. And when we are spiritually aware, then we hurt less. The people that hurt most are the ones who are least spiritually evolved, and this is because they don't see the bigger picture.
A lot of people are going to take exception to that, Alison.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, this is just my version of the cosmos. I think we get less, I think we understand more and hurt less when we get spiritually more aware, when we take on more of the understanding. But I understand what you're saying, so I apologise to those that would feel
No. And, I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, the more knowledge we have, the more understanding we have, the more tools we have to understand things. That's a fact.
I think
the more
spiritual
perspectives
growth
we can look at, Yeah,
I think spiritual growth has to be of the very proactive kind. I think we have to take on and search for actively and do all the work and find out everything and stay up late at night on the internet and ponder on it and everything else. And I think spiritual growth is all about having pain. I think the people who have a lot of pain to deal with are spiritually growing an enormous amount. I think pain and gain are proportional.
I agree with you. I mean, it is hard to have your beliefs and your perceptions challenged and to have to, go through that process of saying, I've got to let go of that one because that one's not working. I think one of the hardest things is we can all be so judgmental. And, I'm not immune to that. One thing that helps me is a friend of mine who said that when you are pointing a finger at someone else, you've got 3 pointing back at yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the axioms of psychology that whatever we see in somebody else that distresses us, whichever we find distasteful in somebody else, is most certainly within. It's the thing that we are keeping in our dark shadow. We don't like it in ourselves, so we've buried it. We like it even less when somebody brings it to us. And that's the real spiritual growth, to accept that what they are bringing to you is distasteful and unpalatable, but then to work with it and find acceptance. Now, that's the huge spiritual growth opportunity which exists at the moment.
Now, you mentioned the close proximity of the spiritual realms causing free-floating anxieties, and again, if that is the case, then none of us are immune to that. So what is actually creating that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So the planet Neptune represents a lot of the spiritual component of the other realms, and the planet Saturn represents the component of Earth and the earthly realms. So we had the Big Bang, our dimension, our universe, our one-verse was created, and Saturn sort of represents the earthiness and the structure of that, the hardship and the struggle that comes along with that. The other realms, Neptune's realms, are much more pleasant. We're just fused into blissful oneness with the great white light. When our dimension was created, the God creator, goddess creator, the higher creator, put in boundaries to make us frightened of dying, because if we didn't fear death, we would simply slip our human bodies and just go straight back. This is way too harsh a world. It was much nicer being fused with the great white light. And so our fear of death keeps us alive, basically. When the spiritual realms represented by Neptune come in too close to Saturn, as they are doing in astrology, so they're doing in collective, what that's telling me is that they are getting too close for our earthiness, for our bodies, for our nervous systems. And so when spirit comes this close, it jangles our nervous system. It threatens to rub out or erase our bodies or our nervous system, the things that our structure, our height and width and depth. And it causes anxiety because we're supposed to feel anxiety at the close presence of spirit, otherwise we will just leap into spirit and lose the body. And so it's that anxiety that we're feeling. It's the close proximity of the spiritual realms which is causing this free-floating anxiety, which we're attaching to anything. Now, I understand that a lot of spiritual people will go, what? The spiritual is a beautiful and wonderful thing and I want to walk towards it. I disagree. I think you want to walk towards it until it actually appears, and then you think, oh my God, I am so frightened. I feel so anxious. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Well, what I'm describing is my version of the way the cosmos is actually made up structurally, and so that's why I think we've all got the free-floating anxiety.
Okay, now you told me something before we started recording that I think is worth mentioning. You talked about the upheaval in the world, and then you talked about colds and viruses. Where's the connection here?
Right. So I did some work on the sun a couple of years back, and I found that, well, my theory is that the sun signals to the viruses on Earth and turns them on at certain times. So we're just looking at ordinary viruses, the cold virus, the flu virus, for instance. So the sun throws out a whole pile of plasma, ionized protein, high energy stuff, high voltage stuff. It rushes to Earth and it alters the Earth somewhat. It changes. It's like messages arriving into Earth's surface. And all this is being proved scientifically now anyway. Okay, so what happens then is that filters down to us ordinary human beings here on the Earth's surface, and the viruses which have been switched on by the sun come to us as cold and flu viruses. And what is a virus? A virus is a packet of genetic code that finds a host and rewrites the cell codes, the codes of the cell in the host, us. So I thought it was fantastically interesting that as we have this huge upheaval currently, we've also got a whole pile of activity on the sun and a huge amount of solar wind and other material coming from the sun, potentially activating viruses on Earth, and then we've all got colds and flu. So now, if you tell me that in the States now everybody is not, they're all healthy and everything, then my theory is wrong. But around me in the UK, everybody's coming down with this virus. Cold virus, me included.
Wow, that's an interesting one. I mean, I remember when we had an interview about that some time ago. You're saying that these viruses literally change our DNA. And if that is true, then none of us are immune to that, including Donald Trump.
Yes. Good point, Sandie. That's an excellent point. So what could happen right now is he gets a cold or flu virus and it rewrites his DNA, and his progressive sun has moved into Virgo, so he's a changed man overnight.
Okay, so have you looked at his chart really closely for the next year? I've got it here. He stays in this sphere, I think. He's getting used to something. He's trying new boots on, and he's having to make adjustments. And it just comes at him and comes at him and comes at him. And I guess that's how it feels to be the new President of the United States, to be honest with you. So I've got, feelings and understandings about all that. I think in the collective, if people want a kind of an overview on, when's all this going to calm down and when will I feel better? I think we're looking at up to next August. I think in the early part of 2017. We're doing a program on this soon, so we'll get more information about this then. But I think in general, just a quick snippet, I think we're looking at the activation is going through into the new year, and I don't think until we get to August that we start to calm down. And I think Trump is just part of this because he's a huge figure now. Do you see him staying the course the whole 4 years?
Do you know, I haven't even thought about that. You're the second person to ask me that today. Apparently there's some theory about him not surviving or something. I couldn't even comment on that because I wouldn't see it in astrology. I haven't looked for it and I haven't asked the chart to offer it to me. I just assume that he's voted in and, he'll be there for 4 years. And in any case, because you have an election every 4 years, I'm just assuming that in 2 years' time you start the election race, the presidential race for the next one. So you haven't got a long time anyway. But it's funny. Everybody's asking me that. I think a lot of people are thinking, do you think he might not be around for very long? I'm seeing him around for a long time because I haven't asked the chart any differently. I've just assumed he will be.
Well, if he's a puppet of the cosmos, then he needs to be, doesn't he? Because there's work to be done.
Yeah, well,
Good or bad.
He assists everybody with their change, doesn't he? There's a standing joke about that spiritually, isn't there? We all go, oh yes, we want spiritual change, we want change. And the moment we get it, we go, I didn't want that change.
No, exactly.
Don't give me that change, as if we can choose the change. We'll be given the change that is the best for us, I think, according to Cosmos. And we just need to work with Cosmos to bend it 10-15% our way, which we can do. But we'll still get the stress, we'll still get change, because that's the way the Cosmos trains us up. That's the way we spiritually grow. So,
Alison, thank you. Nothing much else to say at the moment, but we will keep
thank you.
on
It's been great. I hope it helps people.
I hope so too. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. You've been listening to The Cosmic Buzz, a frank and irreverent commentary on how the cosmos is currently pulling our strings. Alison Chester-Lambert works for BBC Radio, appears in the UK's Daily Mail Online, and has a master's degree in the study of astrology and psychology. She runs an astrology school and is the author of 2 books, including the astrology reading cards. You can find out more about Alison at AlisonChesterLambert.com. And you can learn more about me at Sedgbeer.com. SEDGBEER.